Nirvana's lead singer was found dead April 5th, 1994, inside of a greenhouse.
We need to confirm identification, and then we need to perform an autopsy.
The industry moved tens of millions of records before a gunshot in Seattle killed the noise. For 30 years, Krist Novoselic kept his mouth shut. The official line is neat. Kurt Cobain pulled the trigger alone. But some folks stood close enough to remember it differently. The fear, the dead silence, the details that just won't wash away. Krist was front row for the wreck. Too damn close. He saw things he locked away. And he never made the one call that could have changed the hand they were dealt. After that, blood became a commodity, and the labels just kept counting their cash. Today, we're kicking that door open. April 1994. Seattle is drowning in freezing rain. Drops beating against the glass. The countdown begins. 24 hours before the gunshot, Novoselic was at the airport, one of their last face-to-faces. The biographies usually water it down to a tough conversation. Too damn soft. According to the folks standing nearby, it was rough. Two men grabbing each other by the jackets. Krist dug his hands into Cobain's shoulders, trying to stop him. Kurt shoved him off, turned around, and headed for the automatic doors. Right before stepping out, he looked back. One short glance, a face like stone. Krist was looking at a guy who was already too far gone. The space between them became a wall. Kurt vanished behind the sliding glass. The next few hours were a dead blank. The rain washed the tracks off the blacktop. Kurt went home, the door shut. Meanwhile, Krist was sitting at his place. The dread was a physical weight now. Cold sweat, keys tight in his fist. He stared at the door, knowing he could walk out right then. He could take a few steps, get in the car, drive over there. But his grip loosened. The keys hit the table with a hard metallic clatter. Krist sank back into the couch. Later, the suits would call it respecting personal boundaries. But a guy from the road crew was in the room. He watched Krist walk to the window, stare out toward Cobain's place, and quietly say, "He's already dead." After that, he backed off and left his friend alone in a house with a shotgun. The price of this secret? A slug of lead. We're torching the producer's lies to put the cold facts on your screen. All you have to do is make one physical click. Leave a hard mark under this video, hit the subscribe button, or drop your word in the comments. Your reaction is the only oxygen we get down here. It's what keeps us digging through these archives, dragging new names into the light. Now, let's see how this secret started ringing the register. 30 years of silence isn't a strategy, it's a dead weight on your chest. The second the medics zipped the heavy plastic in the greenhouse, the music machine kicked into overdrive. The label managers didn't march the survivors to shrinks, they marched them to lawyers. Thick stacks of contracts hit the desk. Official biographers later sold the public a polished version of events, but it was just a cheap front. Stagehands at the tribute gigs saw a different set of gears grinding. PR flacks cornered Novoselic in cramped dressing rooms, shoving white sheets of paper into his hands with a pre-approved script. The dangerous paragraphs, blacked out with a heavy marker. The press wasted no time turning the blood on the floor into printer's ink. The presses rolled. Photographers aimed their glass at a closed casket. Hacks turned the wreck into a fresh commodity. The corporations demanded the right faces for the cameras. They cashed in on every tear. They turned Krist's silence into new record pressings. The label bosses weren't standing at the graveyard. They were sitting in glass offices staring at sales charts. Security walled off the studio. Phones went dead. Reporters were held at the gates. Recorders were killed at the door. Fans mobbed the blacktop, pushing against the barricades, waiting for an answer. The industry fed them a picture. But Krist chose a different route. He clenched his jaw and shut his mouth. He wasn't spinning theories. He was building a wall around himself. For him, guilt took the shape of a plastic telephone receiver, the one he never picked up that night. Every time the radio spun Nirvana, he felt the cold, hard plastic in his hand all over again, and the heavy drag of those keys in his pocket. The mailman dropped bags of letters, thousands of envelopes from strangers. Inside, accusations, photos of Kurt, someone else's theories about that night. Krist tossed them into the fire and watched the paper curl into black ash. He lived breathing that ash for years. Reporters flashed cash for an exclusive, shoving mics against his car window. Krist just put the pedal to the floor and drove off. He wasn't about to pawn his friend's last hours for hard currency. He knew the score. One wrong word could fire up the heavy machinery. Lawyers, contracts, payouts, rights, album covers. That whole circus kept his mouth bolted shut just as tight as the fear. Krist knew how the racket worked. He'd seen it chew guys up and spit them out in the gutter. So he chose the quiet, then the dirt, then the fence. He cut a check, bought a patch of woods, drove stakes into the ground, strung up chain link, ran barbed wire across the top. The industry took his friend and left him with a contract, dead silence, and a locked door. Today, a 55-year-old Krist Novoselic sits down in front of the glass lens. He's breaking a 30-year corporate gag order. He cracks open a dusty cardboard file. He lays this swallowed secret out on the wooden table. He calls out a hard, physical fact. The industry kept his mouth shut, but today, he's cutting the cable. For years, the machine sold the fans a theory of a sudden breakdown. Media conglomerates printed copy about an unpredictable tragedy. Novoselic is smashing that glossy storefront with a heavy steel hammer. He confirms the exact timeline. He saw a dead man walking right there in the airport terminal. Cobain's pupils locked onto the end of the line 24 hours before the trigger was pulled. Krist read the verdict in the set of Kurt's jaw. This detail rips up the police reports. A spontaneous tragedy turns into a calculated execution. Krist knew the trajectory of that slug. For years, the crowd demanded an alternate ending on their TV screens. Viewers mailed thousands of angry letters. They wanted a brute force rescue op. They wanted Krist to crank the engine of his pickup on that freezing night. They wanted him to kick in the greenhouse glass with a heavy combat boot. They demanded a physical takedown of a loaded weapon. But Novoselic lays down an absolute law of physics on camera. You can't catch a falling concrete block with your bare hands. That shove by baggage claim was the final blow. Kurt mapped out that concrete route himself, built a blind wall, shut the heavy oak door. He personally loaded those lead shells into the shotgun tube, and he pulled the trigger without any outside help. Krist runs those facts every damn day. 0 grains of powder on his fingers. Cold logic hands him a 100% acquittal. The label's legal department stamped that document in black ink. The cops slammed an iron padlock on the case. Krist holds that clean sheet of paper in his hands. The ME's report backs his ironclad alibi. The system cut him a receipt with a 0 guilt balance. But the human body doesn't give a damn about ink stamps. Court papers don't stop the nervous system from firing. Every night, Krist hits the plastic switch, kills the electric light in his isolated bedroom, shuts his eyelids. In that split second, those automatic glass airport doors slide open all over again. He sees those pinned black pupils. He feels the cold plastic of the telephone receiver in his right hand. He feels the metallic dead weight of the car keys in his palm. He hears the drumbeat of the rain hitting the roof. He remembers the crushing silence of his empty living room. Cobain's house was sitting there without armed guards. The deadbolt would have given way to a solid kick. Krist could have gripped the steering wheel hard, floored the gas pedal, closed that fatal gap, knocked that shotgun across the dirty hardwood. Officially, his hands are completely clean. He knows that hard fact. The cops guarantee he's in the clear. But in the pitch black of that room, he's never going to put his own signature on that final report.